Today's lecture I am going to start unit number 1, Arms and the Man. This is a comedy written by George Bernard Shaw. The title of this play comes from the opening words of Virgil's Aeneid, in Latin Arma virumque cano. It means of arms and the man I sing. This epic which glorifies war and the hero in battle. Shaw will use the idea of the hero Sergius in war, the Serbo-Bulgarian War, in order to satirize not merely war itself, but the romantic glorification of war. In addition to this goal, he will also satirize romantic notions of valor and courage, affection and pretense, and most important, misguided idealism. Now I would like to introduce you the great playwright George Bernard Shaw, born on 26th July 1856 and passed away on November 2nd, 1950, known at his insistence simply as Bernard Shaw, was an Irish playwright, critic, polemicist, and political activist. His influence on Western theatre, culture, and politics extended from the 1880s to his death and beyond. He wrote more than 60 plays, including major works such as Man and Superman, which published in 1902, and Pygmalion, which published in 1912, and The St. John, which published in 1923. With a range incorporating both contemporary satire and historical allegory, Shaw became the leading dramatist of his generation, and in 1925 was awarded the Nobel Prize in Literature. Now, I would like to explain in detail the act-wise analysis of this present one play having the title Arms and the Man, written by G.B. Shaw. Now I would like to start to analyze the act 1. This present one act number 1, which is also in the reading of a Shavian play. One should pay attention to Shaw's staging directions at the beginning of the act. Number 1, the stage directions here call for the scenery to convey the impressions of cheap Venice pretentious aristocracy, incongruously combined with good, solid Bulgarian commonplace items. Likewise, since Reina will ultimately be seen as a person who will often assume a pose for dramatic effect, the act opens with her being, in Shaw's words, intensely conscious of the romantic beauty of the night and of the fact that her own youth and beauty are part of it. As we find out later, she even listens at doors and waits until the proper moment to make the most effective dramatic entrance. As noted in the introduction to these notes, the title of this play is ironic, since it comes from the opening lines of Virgil's Aeneid. It means the of arms and the man I sing. Virgil's Aeneid is an epic which glorifies war and the hero in battle. As the same way here, G.B. Shaw will use the idea of the hero Sergius in war, the Serbo-Bulgarian War, in order to satirize not merely war itself, but the romantic glorification of war. In addition to this goal, he will also satirize romantic notions of valor and courage, affection and pretense, and most important, misguided idealism. The dramatic shift that will occur in the play involves two romantic idealists, Reina and Sergius, who, rejecting their original positions, instead of marrying each other, will each become engaged to a practical realist. Sergius to the practical and attractive servant, Lauka and Raina to the professional realist, Captain Bluntschli. Raina is seen at first as the romantic idealist, but she is also characterized as being a fleeting realist when she wonders if her idealism and Sergius' idealism might be due simply to the fact that they have read so much poetry by Byron and other romantics. Likewise, Raina wants to glory in the noble idealism of the war, but she is also deeply troubled by its cruelty. What glory what glory is there in killing wretched fugitives? In this early comment, we have her rationale for her later hiding and thus her saving Bluntschli's life. Before meeting Bluntschli, Raina seems to want to live according to the romantic idealism to which she and Sergius aspire. She knows that he has, in effect, placed her on too high a pedestal, but she does want to make an effort to live up to his high standards. For example, after hearing of his heroic feats, she holds up his photo and elevates it like a priestess, vowing never to be unworthy of him. This hope, however, as we soon see, will not last too long. Captain Bluntschli's arrival through the balcony doors in itself a highly melodramatic and romantic stage entrance. In fact, almost everything about Act 1 is contrived. The lady's bedroom, the concealment of the fugitive behind a curtain, the threat of a bloody fight, the matter of chocolate creams, and finally, the enemy soldier falling asleep in the lady's bed. All of this smacks of artificiality and is juxtaposed against Captain Bluntschli's realistic appraisal of war and his matter of fact assertion that, from a practical viewpoint, Sergius's military charge was as foolish as Don Quixote's charge on the windmills. And actually, while Raina ridicules Captain Bluntschli for his cowardice, for his hiding behind a woman's curtains, for his inordinate fear, he has been under fire for 3 days, and his nerves are shot to pieces, and for his extraordinary desire for chocolate creams, she is nevertheless attached to him, attracted to him, and even though she pretends to be offended at his comments about Sergius, she is secretly happy that her fiancé is not as perfect as we were earlier led to believe that he was. At the end of the act number 1, Raina returns to her artificial pretensions as she tries to impress Bluntschli with her family's aristocratic aspirations, bragging that her father chose the only house in the city with an inside stairway and a library, and furthermore, Raina says she attends the opera every year in Bucharest. Ironically, it is from romantic operas that Raina derives many of her romantic ideals, and she uses one of Verdi's romantic operas as her rationale for hiding this practical Swiss professional soldier. The final irony of the act is that the professional man of war is sleeping as soundly as a baby in Raina's bed, with her hovering over him, feeling protective about him. In this way, the act 1 is over. Now I would like to start to analyze the act number 2. Arms and the Man is an early Shakespearean play, and in it, Shaw used certain techniques that he was never to use again. In the first act, for example, entire act has a farcical note about it, and the use of a screen or a curtain for a character to hide behind was a traditional technique used only in comedies. The court episode in the third act is a contrived bit of farce that amuses the audience, but it cheapens the intellectual aspect of the drama because it contributes nothing other than its own farcical elements. In act number 2, the structure of the act is more serious, but it also uses several traditional farcical elements. For example, there is the use of the exaggerated means, whereby Sergius can deceive Reina while trying to make love with Reina's maid. The story told in the army camp about the soldier who escapes into a lady's bedroom, while the ladies of the story have to listen in pretended dismay. The sudden appearance of the captain and the hasty decisions, which we discover that Captain Petcop knows bluntly, all of these circumstances are elements of melodrama or farce. In the early part of the act, we see Loka as an ingenious maid who refuses to acknowledge that she has the soul of a servant, a fault that she accuses Nicola of having. Later, however, when Sergius tells her that she possesses the soul of a servant, his comment stings. We do, however, admire the way that Loka is able to dismiss Nicola and to manipulate the supposedly superior and aristocratic Sergius. When we meet Sergius and hear of his total disillusionment with war and with soldiering, which is the coward's art of attacking mercilessly when you are strong and keeping out of the way when you are weak, we are then prepared for the fact that Sergius will not be a romantic idealist for long. His new views on war should prepare us for a significant change in his total outlook on life. Thus, he will soon reject Reina's idealistic higher love in favor of a more direct love with the attractive and practical Loka, a maid who says forthrightly that if Sergius is going to embrace her, then at least they should stand back where they can't be seen. With Loka, Sergius can admit that there are at least 6 different people occupying himself, and then wonder aloud, which of the 6 is the real man? That's the question that torments me. We now know that the real Sergius is not the one with whom Reina has fallen in love, the one with the higher love. Thus, by the end of this act number 2, G.B. Shaw has set up all of the necessary motives and reasons for Sergius and Reina to break up their engagement and marry someone else. In this way, here the act number 2 is over. Now I would like to start to analyze the act number 3. After the farcical bit about the discovery of the old coat in the blue closet, which perplexes Major Petcop, Shaw then gets down to the resolution of the drama, which involves the revealing of Reina's, Sergius, and Bluntschli's true natures. First, in Bluntschli's interview with Reina, we see him as the practical man who will not let Raina assume any of her poses. He will laugh at all of the poses that she assumes. Captain Bluntschli, while being charmed and captivated by Raina, refuses to take her poses seriously. That is, he delights in her posturing. But he is not deceived by them. When you are strike that noble attitude and speak in that thrilling voice, I admire you, but I find it impossible to believe a single word you say. Thus, Bluntschli forces Raina to reveal her true nature, and she is delighted that someone has seen through her guise and has allowed her to come down off her pedestal. We were earlier prepared for this revelation when she told her mother that she would like to shock Sergius. We have seen that she finds higher love to be something of a strain on her. Thus, it is ultimately a relief for her to discard all of her artificial poses and finally become herself. Likewise, Bluntschli changes